Breaking, this is not the kind of message Britain expected to hear from its own king. Within hours of a late-night government leak, King Charles has reportedly confronted Prime Minister Keir Starmer over a secret royal tax proposal hidden deep inside Treasury reforms. The news has ignited a storm that's now shaking both Buckingham Palace and Downing Street to their core. What began as a quiet internal budget adjustment has exploded into what insiders are calling a direct challenge to the Crown itself. The King, known for his caution and restraint, has allegedly gone further than any monarch in modern history, personally summoning the Prime Minister and accusing him of betraying centuries of constitutional balance. Within minutes of that confrontation, the entire political establishment went into meltdown. The story began with whispers. A proposal buried under dozens of pages of technical financial reform designed to modernise royal funding. But when a palace accountant discovered the clause that would effectively grant Parliament the power to oversee the Crown's private estates, alarm bells rang through royal corridors. What was meant to be a budget correction suddenly looked like a power grab. The King, usually careful to avoid political entanglements, reportedly demanded an urgent briefing. When he saw the document, he was said to be visibly shaken. For decades, the sovereign grant had been untouchable, a symbolic guarantee of national tradition. But this, according to insiders, was different. It wasn't about money, it was about control. As word of the confrontation spread, journalists began piecing together the truth. Starmer's office had planned to unveil the measure quietly next week, presenting it as a move toward financial transparency. But within hours of the leak, royal aides went on high alert. One described the atmosphere as cold fury. Another said the King believed this wasn't just a policy shift, it was a warning shot. Behind closed doors, Buckingham Palace held emergency meetings into the early hours, debating how far they could push back without igniting a constitutional firestorm. The result was unprecedented. The King decided to speak directly, not through aides, not through press statements, but in person, face to face, with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. According to multiple sources, the meeting took place at Clarence House just before dawn. No cameras, no aides, just the two men. Witnesses later reported the King's car arriving unannounced at the side entrance and Starmer leaving 30 minutes later, pale and unspeaking. What happened in that room remains tightly guarded, but one thing is clear, the monarchy has drawn a line. Shortly after the meeting, senior ministers were summoned to Downing Street for an emergency conference. Reports say tempers flared, with one insider claiming the Prime Minister underestimated him. He thought the King would fold. He didn't. By midday, the story had broken across every major network. King challenges PM over tax seizure plan, read one headline. Constitutional rift at the heart of the realm, said another. The palace refused to comment, but silence only fueled speculation. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #StandWithTheKing and #StarmerExposed began trending within hours. Protesters gathered outside Westminster, waving Union Jacks and chanting, "Hands off the Crown!" For the first time in decades, the public seemed to side openly with the monarchy. It wasn't just royalists, it was ordinary people who felt something sacred was being stolen. Meanwhile, Labour Party insiders scrambled to contain the damage. Several MPs expressed quiet unease, saying they were never briefed on this clause and warning that it could backfire dramatically. Treasury officials insisted the plan was routine, but nobody believed it anymore. Too much smoke, too much fear. Behind the scenes, a different kind of conversation began to spread through the corridors of power, one that asked whether Starmer had gone too far, whether this was reform or something far more dangerous, a calculated move to weaken the monarchy at a time when Britain was already divided and fragile. As the evening fell, news cameras caught a rare sight. King Charles standing alone at a palace window, gazing out at a restless London skyline. Some said he looked calm, others said defiant. But one thing was undeniable. A man raised to embody restraint had just taken a stand against the government of his own country. The question now was simple, yet terrifying. What happens when a monarch defies a prime minister in modern Britain? Could this spark the biggest constitutional crisis since Edward VIII's abdication? By morning, Britain was a nation divided. The headlines had turned brutal. Royal showdown, Starmer's crown crisis, King's fury rocks Downing Street. In coffee shops, on trains, in every office across the country, people whispered about one thing. What did Starmer do to make the king break silence? For decades, the monarchy had been a silent witness to political turmoil, observing, never intervening, but not this time. This time, the silence had been shattered. Reports began surfacing of a second meeting, this one not private. According to leaked documents, the palace had requested that the Prime Minister attend an emergency Privy Council session, something rarely done outside wartime. The government's reaction, panic-cloaked as calm. Number 10 issued a short statement claiming constructive discussions continued, but insiders described something else entirely, a cabinet in open revolt. It began with whispers of resignations. 2 senior ministers reportedly threatened to quit if Starmer didn't back down from the royal tax seizure proposal. Treasury staff were ordered to seal all internal memos. Phones went dark. Journalists outside Downing Street described an eerie silence, guards at the gate, lights burning behind closed curtains, ministers entering without a word. But the silence couldn't hold. Within hours, the leak grew wider. A confidential Treasury draft surfaced online showing plans not just to oversee royal finances, but to redirect portions of Crown Estate income directly into public innovation funds. That phrase set the internet ablaze. Critics called it theft dressed as reform. Supporters claimed it was modern democracy in action, but for millions, it looked like the thin end of a very dangerous wedge. And in the middle of it all stood King Charles, refusing to bend. Palace aides confirmed that His Majesty had spoken privately to senior members of the House of Lords, urging them to protect the constitutional balance. One veteran lord reportedly left the meeting saying the king has never sounded more resolute. For some, it was a rallying cry. For others, a warning. Across the airwaves, commentators began asking questions Britain hadn't heard in a lifetime. Was the king stepping beyond his constitutional limits? Or was he defending them against a government growing too powerful, too arrogant, too detached from its people? The tension became unbearable. That evening, something extraordinary happened. Buckingham Palace issued a short, cryptic statement, just 12 words long. The crown serves the people, but it shall not be subjugated. Those words detonated across the nation. Within minutes, protesters flooded Westminster Square, chanting for the Prime Minister to withdraw the bill. Online, #The Crown Speaks trended worldwide. It wasn't just the UK watching now. The world had turned its eyes to London. American and European outlets called it a constitutional earthquake. Even foreign leaders weighed in. Donald Trump praised the king for showing true backbone. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney urged calm dialogue, but calm was the last thing Britain had left. Inside Parliament, Labour backbenchers began to fracture. A group of 20 members of Parliament reportedly demanded an internal review of the proposed royal tax plan. Rachel Reeves, cornered by reporters, struggled to defend the numbers, insisting the reform was fair, necessary, and overdue. But each word only deepened the firestorm. By now, senior civil servants were preparing for the unthinkable. A legal standoff between the monarch and the Prime Minister. For the first time in decades, constitutional lawyers were quietly discussing something once unimaginable, whether the king could refuse royal assent to a government bill. The idea alone sent shockwaves through Westminster. As night fell over London, rumours spread that the king had summoned his most trusted advisers to Windsor. Some say he wanted to prepare a televised address to the nation. Others claim he was being advised not to, warned that speaking directly to the people could ignite unrest. The palace remained tight-lipped, but a single message from a royal insider slipped through: he won't stay silent forever. Meanwhile, Starmer's allies scrambled to contain the political fallout. Some argued he'd been misled by Treasury officials. Others whispered that the plan had always been deliberate, that it was designed to test the monarchy's strength in a modern Britain. This was never about money, one senior Labour aide admitted off record. It was about power and who really holds it. Those words hit like a hammer because, if true, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a battle for the soul of the nation. As tensions rose, the Queen Consort was reportedly urging restraint, warning the king not to escalate further, but those close to him said it was already too late. The line had been crossed. He believes this is about protecting Britain itself, one aide said quietly, and he's prepared to face the consequences. Outside the palace, crowds continued to swell, flags waving, chants echoing into the night. Police began closing roads around Westminster, bracing for unrest. Britain hadn't felt this volatile in decades, and yet, as midnight approached, something unexpected leaked from inside Number 10. A confidential note suggesting Starmer might be preparing a televised statement of his own. The tone, as sources said, was defiant. Advisors were split, some urging him to apologise, others to stand his ground and challenge the monarchy directly. The idea of a Prime Minister confronting the King on live television seemed unthinkable. But so did everything else that had happened in the past 48 hours. As dawn approached and the country waited for word, one question haunted every corner of Britain. Would Starmer bow to the crown, or would he risk tearing the nation apart to prove a point? By sunrise, Britain was holding its breath. Every channel, every social feed, every pub conversation circled one moment. Keir Starmer's upcoming statement. The air felt heavy, as if the country itself had stopped moving. Outside Downing Street, cameras lined the pavements like soldiers waiting for battle. Inside, aides moved with hushed panic. Phones rang unanswered. No one knew exactly what the Prime Minister would say, but everyone knew what it meant. This would be a turning point, not just for Starmer, not just for the King, but for the future of the United Kingdom itself. At precisely 9 a.m, the door of Number 10 opened. Starmer stepped out, his face pale, his jaw clenched. The kind of expression that hides exhaustion behind resolve. The cameras flashed, the wind howled. And then he spoke, calm at first, measured, deliberate. He insisted that his government had acted entirely within the principles of transparency and fairness. He denied any intention to undermine the monarchy, but then his tone shifted. He looked directly into the cameras, his voice rising. No institution, he said, is above scrutiny. Not Parliament, not the courts, not even the Crown. Those words hit like a thunderclap. Within seconds, broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Commentators froze mid-sentence. In those few lines, Starmer had drawn the battle lines for the nation to see. Supporters cheered, calling it courage. Critics called it arrogance. But before the echo faded, another announcement struck. Buckingham Palace had requested airtime for a national address later that evening. The last time a monarch spoke directly to the nation during a political crisis was generations ago, and now King Charles was about to step into the storm. Throughout the day, tension built like a gathering wave. Outside Westminster, tens of thousands gathered in silence, waiting. Police surrounded the area as chants of "Defend the Crown" clashed with calls of "Power to the people." It was no longer a debate, it was a reckoning. Across Europe, leaders urged calm. Inside Britain, MPs whispered of resignations, early elections, even talk of a constitutional review. Every hour brought new rumours that the Attorney General had been summoned, that the Privy Council was preparing emergency measures, that a royal veto was being discussed. The country teetered between democracy and disorder, between loyalty and defiance. Then came nightfall. The clock struck 7. Every screen in the nation flickered to the royal crest. A deep silence fell. When the camera opened, there was King Charles, alone, in a dimly lit room, his voice steady but fierce. "For centuries," he began, "the crown has served not in dominance, but in duty. It has stood as the symbol of unity when politics divides us, but today I fear that symbol is under threat." He paused, his eyes burning with conviction. No government, no office, no ambition should ever claim ownership of this nation's soul. The monarchy does not belong to me. It belongs to Britain. The words pierced through the noise. Across the country, people stood in their living rooms watching history unfold. The king did not accuse, he did not shout, but every syllable carried the weight of something final. He entered with a message that would echo through time. Let those who govern remember, they are servants of the people, not masters of them. Moments later, the feed cut. Silence followed. And then, chaos. Parliament went into emergency session. Reports emerged that several senior Labour ministers had resigned, unable to defend the government's position. Crowds outside Downing Street erupted in cheers. Some wept, some sang "God Save the King." Inside the palace, aides reportedly watched the reaction unfold with a mix of relief and dread. Because while the king had spoken, no one knew what would happen next. Within hours, Starmer's approval ratings collapsed. His allies began distancing themselves. Rumours of a leadership challenge spread through Westminster like wildfire, but the deeper shock was cultural, moral, almost spiritual. For the first time in modern memory, a monarch had confronted a sitting government and survived politically unscathed. Some called it bravery, others called it dangerous precedent, but no one could deny what had happened. The old boundaries had been broken, the crown had roared. As dawn broke over London once again, Britain felt changed. The Prime Minister was rumoured to be preparing an emergency visit to the palace. Some said it was for reconciliation, others whispered it was to offer his resignation. Outside, as the first light struck the gates of Buckingham Palace, one protester's sign captured the mood of an entire nation. We were divided by politics, but united by the crown, and yet beneath the celebration a quiet unease lingered. Because power, once tested, never fully returns to peace. The monarchy had proven its strength, the government had tasted its limits, but the question that now haunted every corridor of Britain was simple and terrifying. Had the king restored balance to the nation, or had he unleashed a power that could never again be contained?